Okay, I'm just gonna say it. Dragon Ball GT is superior to Dragon Ball Super. I know that's gonna make some of you guys mad, but just hear me out before you go down and type away in the comments. GT may not be canon, but it felt more like Dragon Ball did than Dragon Ball Super. If you disagree with me, I've got a few points today that will change your mind, so stick all the way to the end. GT made Dragon Ball feel like Dragon Ball again. Dragon Ball GT really went back to the roots of the original Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball Super basically is just tournament after tournament, fighting after fighting. It's flashy, it's colorful, there's gods. But what Super lacks is what made Dragon Ball great in the first place: adventure and consequences. Dragon Ball GT brought this back in a big way. Goku, Pan, and Trunks, they travel across the galaxy. It was just like classic Dragon Ball again. They were exploring strange worlds, solving weird problems, and when they faced danger, it felt like it mattered. In Dragon Ball GT, when things went wrong, it really stuck. Characters died, and the Dragon Balls literally turned against humanity. That is great storytelling, and it's the karma of the show for abusing the Dragon Balls for so many years. Meanwhile, in Dragon Ball Super, if there's a dire situation, for example, Frieza explodes the Earth, we just call Whis or Beerus and they solve the problem. There's not the same level of tension or consequence that Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, and Dragon Ball GT really felt like they had, and that kind of kills the story. Dragon Ball GT also had very great character and emotional depth. People will clown on Dragon Ball GT for making Goku a kid again, but honestly, looking back on it, that decision gave his character more depth and growth than anything that happened in Dragon Ball Super. And I'm not saying GT did a great job with Goku. You know, I'm not a huge fan of him going back to a kid. However, Dragon Ball Super did such a bad job with Goku and character development that it makes GT look great. GT, when it forced Goku turning into a child, it made him relearn his body. It made him forced to fight smarter. He had to adapt and think and use his battle IQ rather than rely on pure brute strength. It was honestly a creative way to go ahead and depower Goku without making him an irrelevant side character, which would never happen. GT made Goku learn again, which is something that made Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z so special. Even the transformations, they had emotion behind them. Super Saiyan 4 wasn't just another color of Super Saiyan. It really meant something. It tied back that feeling of primal instinct and power that the Saiyan race holds inside. It was raw, wild, super powerful, but the transformations still felt earned. You compare that to the transformations in Dragon Ball Super. Yes, they do look cool, they look sick, but they don't carry the same emotional value. Not to say that the Dragon Ball Super transformations are bad in any way, they just don't compare to Super Saiyan 4. In my opinion, the Super Saiyan 4 transformation is the best transformation since Goku's original Super Saiyan transformation. The only other in contention is maybe Gohan's Super Saiyan 2 transformation. GT also had very distinct and obvious themes. Here's something that I feel like a lot of people do give GT credit for, and it's that it showed real themes. There was a story behind everything that was happening. The Dragon Balls turning into the Black Star Cursed Dragon Balls wasn't just a random thing that happened. It was a message. It was something that had meaning and was deep. Every wish had its cost, and I think this really affected viewers because it shows that in life you can't just take shortcuts. There's always going to be a consequence. That's the storytelling that made Dragon Ball so good in the first place. Dragon Ball Super doesn't really explore any themes or ideologies like this. I mean, don't get me wrong, Super is a very fun show. It is visually pleasing, but all of the plot points are pretty surface level. It's always about who's the strongest and not about what the fight actually means. When Dragon Ball GT finally ended, it was a beautiful ending. Goku walking away with Shenron wasn't just a normal ending. It was closure for the whole series. The kid that we grew up with, Goku, who loved to fight and continuously battle, he had finally outgrown the world. Dragon Ball Super doesn't do this at all, obviously. Super kind of feels like it's never going to end. It never wants to end. Dragon Ball Super really is just more content to please us Dragon Ball fans. And don't get me wrong, GT is not perfect. It had horrible pacing, some weird characters, and underused characters, but at least at the end of it, it tried to give us something meaningful. So yeah, GT may not be canon, but at least it really felt like Dragon Ball. Super may have have had a bigger budget. It had flashier fights. It had hype. It had transformation. But what it lacked was heart. And GT really gave us the Dragon Ball heart that kept the series going. Now, I would like to reiterate, I am not a Dragon Ball Super hater. I actually really enjoyed Dragon Ball Super. But I'm hoping that with Dragon Ball Super Season 2 or anything that we get in the future, it can have the heart and the storytelling that Dragon Ball GT gave us so many years ago. But what about you? Are you leaning towards Team Dragon Ball GT? Or are you more of a Dragon Ball Super fan? Drop down your take in the comments below. I will be replying to every single comment. And if you're interested to see my take on the fusion debate, click the video on the screen right now.